The Great Pyramid weighs 6 million tonnes. It's 481 feet tall. It consists of over 2.5 million blocks. It's targeted on true north within 3/60ths of a single degree. It's got the dimensions of the Earth incorporated in its structure. The stones weigh 70 tonnes each. Average block weighing 2.5 tonnes. I'll repeat, there are over 2.5 million blocks in that pyramid. Do you want to know what the conspiracy theory is? Some people out there actually believe that the Egyptians built that pyramid. Do the math. Do the math. Some of the theories on how they got those stones is they floated them down the Nile River. Where were the quarries? 2.5 million stones. How did you get 481 feet high stones? Oh, there were ramps. The ramps would have been 3 times the size of the pyramid to get round and round and round like a car park. The only thing I saw that was in the vicinity of that resembled something that I could sort of see modern technology was a KFC. And that was back in the 90s. So what do we really know about world history? We've been indoctrinated in our belief system through the education system of things are just the way they are. And we're actually undoing those belief systems to learn about what the true reality is. So today we have Steve Strong, and he's going to be presenting on the truth revelations, the forgotten origins of Australia. These guys have published 7 books that examines the evidence that the original Australians sailed to and settled in North America over 40,000 years ago. So this is a journey into the hidden history of Australia and reveals the true history of Australia and also at a planetary level. So prepare to have your belief systems upgraded. It's going to be quite an interesting journey. Steve's very passionate, very dedicated to all this. He's going to take you through all his research. I mean, it's very, very grounded and it's very practical. It comes from many different aspects and incorporates many different viewpoints. And here to tell you more, please make welcome Steve Strong.
Let me explain where we're coming from. About 8 years ago, I was called down to the Ramanjeri, a very sacred group. I was given ceremony here and I was given a role, which is Eruption. It's called Blackfella, Whitefella Dreaming. And my role, and the role of my son, and we were told this at the time, was to go out into mainstream, which I sighed when I heard this, and convince them of the original truths. This is a difficult task, I can tell you, and it's been quite frustrating trying to break into mainstream, and I can tell you there's quite a few groups that are vehemently opposed to what we're doing. So it's become a long and involved process, and this is probably the first time ever I've got a script here because I normally don't have one, but because Evan's not here I've got to make sure this works reasonably well. And I use my son for one thing. When I get lost, he tells me where I'm up to and then I can pick it up again, but today I don't have him, so I've got to write some things down so I know what I'm doing. And every now and then bear with me while I look at this so I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh right, okay. Right. What I could do, we've got an hour and a quarter here. What I could do in that hour and a quarter is talk to you about, I've just got to check this clock here. Okay. I could talk to you about 50 of the sites we've seen in the last 10 years. And I can tell you one thing now. Every one of those sites breaks the rules when it comes to what you've read in books and what you've been told in schools. What the original people have, and have had for quite some time, is a completely different history to what mainstream claims they've had. And what's taken place is when archaeologists and science have gone into country, they've gone onto country not given ceremony like me, which means they can't tell them a thing. And what they normally do is they say, yes boss, whatever you say boss, and off you go. That's the way they see this. They do not tell them anything. And there are many original people that no longer know their truths either because it's been hidden from them too. Now what we've had to do is to assemble all that information. Now what I could do is do about 10 or 12 of those sites. But I won't, because there's a problem here, and there's a problem in every group I go to, and unfortunately because we've got a short amount of time, basically you guys are tired from yesterday but you look fresh now, so what you're getting is basically 2 science lessons. I make no apologies for that, and I'll explain why. Because everyone in this room has been in a school or been affected by schools. I should know because I've been a principal, I've been a head teacher, and I've fought with the Department of Education for quite some time. And I know what schools do. And even though you guys are enlightened and you've seen the other side, You spent from the ages of 5 to about 18 there, and don't tell me you weren't affected by it. As much as you think you weren't, I've seen children come at the age of 5 with their eyes open, and they're very aware, and by the time they get to high school, we've taken it all out. So you are damaged. So before I can start talking about archaeology and science that breaks every rule mainstream claims about our history, and it's not just Australian history, this is global history. This changes everything. Graham Hancock now is working solely on Americans, Aboriginal people in Australia, in America, through the work we did. He acknowledges that. He knows that's true. And most people in America know it's true too. In this country we know nothing about the original truths. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now to do that, unfortunately, you have to remember when you went to school, the first thing you learnt was what was right and what was wrong. And you learnt that in absolute terms. The problem is the people who are telling you this have no idea what is right and wrong. So you've been conditioned, you've been brainwashed, and you've been told things that aren't true. Now we're going to deal with one aspect of that today. Now in high school, at one stage I was involved in history. And do you know what the last 7,000 years of history is? Warfare, grief, and oppression. Every now and then an enlightened soul like Galileo makes a discovery, but waits until he dies before he publishes the book, because he knows if he published it before he would have been killed. And don't think today that somehow we've got better. We seem to think we have, but we have not. We are the same people behaving the same way. Yes, there's a change coming, and I know it is coming. I know what the elders have told me about that. We won't talk about that today. But that, we have to clear that up. And what we've got to do first, I've got to explain to you. This is what you've been told about how you evolved. It works something like this. Around 5 million years ago, there were monkeys, and all of a sudden, something changed. And from that, we have a new species, which are called hominids. And by the way, they've never found that actual species that did that, but that doesn't matter. They still call that a fact. That happened around 5 million years ago. And then, we had this hominid. And of course, as we all know, all the hominids were found in Africa. And we've got Lucy that's 3.1 million years, and she's quite small, and she's got a brain capacity of about 560, but she is a hominid. And we said, okay then, that's where it begins. And then from them we have hominids like Homo habilis, then it gets up to Neanderthal, that's supposed to have originated in Africa and wandered out before the Homo Sapiens of Africa by over 1 million years. That's quite odd. But anyway, it wandered out on its own. Then we have other ones you've heard of like Denisovans, Homo enigma, and there's now about 15 different hominids that are running around the countryside 100,000 years ago. And from that, around about 200,000 years ago, from all these hominids, something special evolved. Homo sapiens sapien. Sapien means wise twice over. That's a contradiction. Homo emotional, yes, I would accept that, but never wise. Anyway, from that point, we stood above the triangle. We wiped out all the hominids, so we're told, and then we deposit ourselves on the very top, and all other species are below us. That's what we've been told. The problem with that is there's some baggage that goes there we have to clean up, because we're also told through Darwin and others something called survival of the fittest. That because we're smarter, we use our intelligence to subjugate and dominate other species. And that is our way. And of course today, as we all know, we do this par excellence. You'll know at the moment, or if you don't, trust me, 50 cents in every dollar made on this planet is devoted to warfare and security. If we spent all that money on the people who were poor and deserved it, this would be paradise. But that's never going to happen, because these wars and this security must continue, because we cannot embrace our true essence. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have to do first is to clear up the lies about where we began. And when we clear that up, you'll find we have a completely different ancestry and heritage. Now, quite recently, mainstream got very excited. Oh, it's up there. Right, they got very excited about this. It's an axe. And they announced to the world My God, the axe is 65,000 years, and we thought the original people got here 50,000 years, maybe 60. Oh well, they said, we'll move it up 5. We'll move it up 5, we'll make it 65. By the way, did you know when they did this, the axe is 65,000 years, they found artefacts there that were dated 80,000 years, but no one talked about that. They never mentioned it. They just left it with the axe and said, okay, we'll move it up 5,000 years, and we know the Africans got out of Africa about 75,000 years ago and wandered around the countryside, and they must have come straight to Australia. That's their story. Ladies and gentlemen, and they said, look, this axe, it's the first one found. It predates every other axe by 20,000 years. What they didn't tell you was the axe that predated was Australian, and the one after was Australian, and you will not find an axe like this anywhere else in the world until 15,000 years ago, maybe 23 in Japan. They didn't mention that part, which meant the axe found in Australia is at least 42,000 years older than the axe found anywhere else in the world, because the original people are supposed to be the most backward of all. So they didn't make much of an issue of that. They just said, oh, it's in front of the other axes. They never said they're all found in Australia, because that would make people think a bit more. So they're very selective in what they say. So there we are. That's the story according to them. We got here 65,000 years ago and stayed here. No one in, no one out. What I was told when I did archaeology for 3 years before I stormed out was when they got here, they forgot how to make the boat. They got them here. Remember this, they made an axe before anyone else on the planet by 40,000 years. They made a boat before anyone else sailed to another continent. When they got here, they just forgot the whole damn thing. That's what we're told. And everyone says, yep, I'm happy with that. We'll go with that. It's fine. The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, it's not logical. Oh God, here we go. Oh, praise the Lord. Okay. Now, what you have up there is a series of dates. Those dates are not mine. They're all done by people with white coats and degrees. Every one of them. Great Barrier Reef, 180,000 years fire stick farming. That was done by the expert Gurdeep Singh, Jim Bowler. They did this in 1983. Lake Eyre, Skullcap. Lake George, 120,000 years. Panoramidi, 75,000 years but much older. Snowy Mountains, 100,000 years. Rottnest Island, they don't argue. They've said for quite some time 70,000 years, and that's down in South West Australia. Now, it goes on. The one that isn't there, and I hope is going to turn up, is I'm going to make a point. Of all those ones there, if I'm right with one of them, the out of Africa theory is wrong. We have 10 sites that have been done by experts that have given dates like this. What we're going to do now, I hope, because I have actually no idea, is we're going to discuss a few of them, touch wood. Oh, we did that. All right, we're doing that one first. Okay, this is WLH3, like Mungo Man. Now, when the scientists found this, we've got two scientists. Jim Bowler says 40,000 years. He did dates on geology 300 metres away and gave us a date of 40,000 years. Alan Thorne worked on the skeleton, underneath the skeleton, and geology decided, came up with 63,000 years. This is in the middle of Australia. And don't forget, they're supposed to have landed on the top of Australia, made their way around the coastline gradually, and that took 20,000 years, and through the inland rivers, and get into the middle about 30,000 years when they got here. Being 65,000 years means an entry date of about 100,000 years to get to that spot. That's a problem. So Jim Bowler says it can't be that date because it doesn't fit in with out of Africa. I say 45,000 years. Alan Thorne says more. Now, I don't care which is right. It doesn't really matter because the interesting part's not that. What they did, this is the, oh, by the way, this is the oldest Homo sapien found in the world. And guess where it's found? In Australia. It's complete. But that doesn't matter either. What they did was they took the little finger here. They extracted mitochondrial DNA, which is something the women carry. Very reliable. You can date it. Every time there's a mutation in a population, it's 3,500 years. Y chromosome from the men, can't do a thing with it. You just can't control it. Things don't change. Right, so what we've got a date. That date, and we've got mitochondrial DNA. And the experts 10 years ago looked at it in their laboratory, and they said this: ignore it. It's rubbish. Because it doesn't, and here's a trick, its mitochondrial DNA does not relate to any hominid or Homo sapiens species on the planet. Not even the original people. Therefore, we will ignore it. And they did. And they did that for 10 years, no one spoke about it. Then about 1 year ago, Sydney Uni decided, let's go back and do that mitochondrial DNA, because whatever they said before must be right because they're scientists. And what they found out is what the first mob said was utterly wrong, completely wrong. And what they said was this: ignore it, but for a different reason. This time they said ignore it because we found European genes inside this person. It must be tainted by a European. Ladies and gentlemen, Europeans came into existence 40,000 years ago. If Bowler's right, it's 45,000 years ago in the middle of the desert. If Thorne is right, it's 65,000 years ago. It was made before Europeans were made. They could have said, there's our grandfather. What they said was, ignore it again. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the grandfather, the great-great-grandfather of all Europeans. He has European DNA inside him already. The original people are the original people of everyone. That's what it proves. Mainstream sees it differently and says, oh, it's tainted, forget it again. They will never look at it properly. We know from Lake Mungo there are dates coming out of there 110, 120,000 years, and they've been sat on for 5 years. We're still waiting for them. We know what's going on, but they want to keep it a secret. So let's factor that into who that is part of our ancestry. Right. This is an interesting story, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jim Bowler. This is his side. He is the one who's defending out of Africa. And this is what he said. This side here, which is down in Victoria, it's a midden, they got a date of 80 to 90,000 years for human activity. Bowler was the one who denied Lake Mungo because it got past 60,000 years. This is 80 to 90, probably 90 according to him, and is found in the bottom of Victoria. It would have taken at least 20,000 years from the first settlers to make their way all the way down there, which means we have an entry to 110,000 years. Bowler reluctantly announced this 2 years ago, but gave us a proviso. He said, the science is perfect, and it is. I've looked at it. You can't challenge it. The date's right. He says, but I don't have another date like that, so I'm not going to publish it. I need a date that goes past 60,000 years. The axe is 65, Jim. Get your act together. You're ready to start. And what's really interesting, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Bowler signed off a paper in 1983 that said humans were here 180,000 years ago. Now, I don't blame him. He forgot. Look, I go shopping, my wife gives me a list and it's written down in front of me and I don't get it all, and she says, why didn't you get it was written down? I'm going to use the Jim Bowler excuse now. I forgot. I was there, I know I did it, but it's gone now. This is common, this is mainstream, and we have to deal with these people all the time. What that tells me is, that is a date of 90,000 years in the southern part of Australia. This is wrong, our story's wrong. By the way, I'm going to give you just pure science. This is what they're telling us, but these guys are all compartmentalised. When they talk about one thing, they don't factor in others. That date's well known. All of Australia knows about it. But when they said, we'll move it up to 65, well, what about this mob? They're not included anymore. They're not part of it. They must be someone who came and left before, I suppose. I'm not sure. All right, okay, thank God for that. That's 2 in a row. Next up, we've written an article. It's going to come up soon. It's called Over to You, Jim Bowler. Now you can move. We told him to go down to Victoria, then go across to South Australia. I've been and seen this thing. What they did in 1939, a guy called Montford dug this out. I hope we have another picture of it. Well, probably don't. I don't know if I haven't put it in there or not. Oh, we do. There it is. That's what it looked like. That is a crocodile head, a saltwater crocodile. That head, I've seen a plaster cast, because they've never shown the original in the South Australian Museum. The plaster cast was hidden underneath a table with no label. And I crawled under there with the elders when they took me there. And the lady in the kiosk says, yeah, pull it out, pull it out. I don't know what it is either. Nobody did. But at least South Australian Museum can say they've shown it. A plastic cast of it. They dug that out in 1939. Montford said this had to be done when saltwater crocodiles were swimming around Lake Eyre. Josephine Flood said, I'm going to be so bold to suggest that this was done at a time when saltwater crocodiles were anywhere in the area, and the closest she knew of, which was 100 kilometres away, finished 75,000 years ago. This is right in the desert. This is 30,000 years to get to if you landed up the top. This is a minimum date, ladies and gentlemen. They're all minimum dates. We don't know the maximum, we just know the minimum. That is a head that is 6 foot long. That is a massive saltwater crocodile. The last time the middle of South Australia was running around with saltwater crocodiles is about 120,000 years. And look at the work that was done there. There's writing around the side there too. They have their own language. The original people have a proper language. They've always had one. That is proof. Their proof again. You go to South Australia. Oh, by the way, after I wrote an article about this, they took the plaster cast from underneath the table and hid that too. Now there's nothing. See how they do this? If something turns up, there's a way of doing it. Again, all I'm taking you through is their story. Oh, there it is. There's me pulling it out with my fingers on it. And that gives you an idea of the size. When I said this is a massive head, if you saw a crocodile like that, it would be huge in Kakadu. It's only the head. Put a body on it and work out what it is. It could bite and eat me in one bite. It's that massive. That's what they've now hidden. Now remember, I can tell you Munford said we will send a plaster cast of this to every museum in the world. It will change world history. No cast was sent and it's never been displayed. It is still in the bowels of that museum. The museums are one of the greatest thieves of original archaeology on this planet. They are disgusting. There's your human tree, ladies and gentlemen. I had no idea that was turning up, so we're going to give that a miss, Ari. Right. Now, I could go on and talk about this. In fact, I could do those sites for the rest of the time here, but we're going to cut and paste here. Now I'm going to introduce you to the massive genetic square hole in any story about human history. It's the Denisovans. There's one there. And as you can see, they look so different to us. Not at all. I get really annoyed when people talk about Homo sapiens being special. For God's sake, you could walk down the street with a Neanderthal and a Denisovan and say g'day, and you wouldn't think twice about them. Now, here's the problem with the Denisovans. They were around from 500,000 years ago, and we got a problem. Because here's the issue. Every scientist will tell you the Denisovans and the Neanderthals split when the Homo sapiens went one way and we went the other. And that happened 250,000 years ago. They were alive 500,000 years ago. So the date when Homo sapiens came into existence has to be before that. Chris Stringer, who is the head of science in London, he runs the London Museum, said, I've got bad news at a 5th conference, a European conference. He said, we've got the whole thing wrong. It's been said. The date's wrong and the place is wrong. We're out by between 400 to 100,000 years. They're wrong, it's further. The problem with this guy is Denisovan. There is one race on this planet that reeks of Denisovan genes. Blackfellas. And here's the problem. We know when it happened. The scientists have told me this. 44,000 years ago, original genes were swamped with Denisovan genes. But 44,000 years ago, we were in this country. The Denisovans are a lesser species, so they can't sail boats to other countries because the rules say that. So how did we get swamped with Denisovan genes? Either we went and saw them and got very up close and personal, or they came and saw us. Now, since we have no Denisovan hominids in Australia, somebody made contact. Now, I can tell you how great that contact is. If you're a European here today, you'll have between about 0.5 to 1% Denisovan. If you're in Asia, 1.5 to 2. The Pacific Islands, 2 to about 2.3. If you're an original person, it starts at 3 and goes up to 6. I am 4.8. I don't call myself a Homo sapiens sapien because 1/20th me is that mob. I don't fully belong to you. I'm part him, and which of my 5% of genes is working? It could be my brain, it could be my foot, I don't know. But I do know this, my wife did a test because of the death threats we're doing. She made me do a genetic test, and I measure up at 4.7 Denisovan. Now, here's the problem. I am not fitting into mainstream anything now. I shouldn't be this. I'm original, and I don't look that original. I know that there's only 2 people in the world that have higher ratings than me, and they both look very original. Now, look at me, and I'm 4.7. How did that happen? I'll tell you now, because the original people sailed around the world. That's the only way it can happen. And they lived, and the Denisovans lived from Siberia to Spain. They stayed in Europe. They never went to Africa. They never went anywhere else. We went to them. And I'm part of that story. And you can't argue with that because I've got the score, they are the people, and we all know the original people have this, and it happened 44,000 years ago when we were in transit. And by the way, that's before the Europeans came into existence again. The Europeans are late in this story. Okay, and by the way, it's really annoying. When these people announced the acts, they know that. Everyone knows that. And by the way, scientists have said, we got a problem with this 44,000 years ago. How did this happen? It doesn't make sense. They've said it's a huge hole in our Earth's history, unless you change it. That's the only way you can fix this up. And then here's the best part of this story. 3 months ago, love the scientists. They are great at doing the work, but lousy at doing conclusions. They found there's a brand new strand of gene. I have it. Only original people have it. Africans don't have it. Europeans don't have it. And Asians don't have it. And it's a hominid. There's only one problem. They don't know where it is. They can't find the hominid. They cannot link it to any species of Homo Sapiens, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, anything. I have it within me a genetic strand that's of human type, but it does not belong to anything they've found. And what they've said, no problem, we'll just keep looking, we'll find one. They may find one and make it up, but they haven't got one yet. The reason's very simple. I asked the original people, and I'll tell you, who are their countrymen? They all tell me the same story. Our countrymen are the Pleiadians. What they've found is the missing link, the Pleiadian genes. They're inside me, and they're inside every person in this room, but not as strong. Because we went around the world and we exported our genes. And Europeans have got them. You saw Mungo 3, he's got them. He passed them on. We've all got them. And I'm going to tell you something now. Turn them on. You need them. Now, that scientists won't say that. They'll just say, oh, well, we'll find it one day. Rubbish. They've been looking a lot. They can't find it. It's not there. I didn't know we were doing that. All right. How's your science lesson going? God, listen, what's going to happen, guys? You're going to do your science lesson. We'll do what we do after. It's going to work that way because I've never done an hour and a quarter talk before. Okay, hair. This hair was taken by a full descent original person 110 years ago by an English scientist, and a Danish crew got a hold of this hair 2 years ago and they analysed it. And we all thought the original people were going to be whatever they thought, and they got a problem. They found that because now they did a complete genome study. It's the first one they've done. The original people, the last group, to have this done. What they found was this. They've now got dates. Asian, European, 40,000 years. African and original, at least 70,000 years. And the researchers couldn't work out who to put first. So what they said was this, and I read it. They said, well, since the original people have been in Australia for 50,000 years, then Africans came first because they came into existence before them. That was the only reason. And then they said in the paper, you cannot link genealogy with geography. They made that point, and they also made the point, my God, we've said that, and they made the point about the axes. But the axes in Australia are so different. How can they be African if they came from Africa? They said, we're saying this, but we're not sure why. If they knew what we knew now, they would put the original people. So ladies and gentlemen, what you're now finding through what that mob out there are telling you is there's a completely different story through the scientists who are not sharing the story with you, A, because of posting, or B, because they have blinkers on and they can't see anything else. What we have here is a story of science that tells us all of our history is not as we're told. Now, I normally work on mitochondrial DNA. Why? Because it's reliable, predictable. If you take Australia, when Alan Wilson came out here, he sampled 31 people, 31 full descent original people, and got 22 mitochondrial DNA mutations. He multiplied that by 22 times 35, and he said that's 77,000 years. Then he said, my God, I've got a mutation rate in Australia of 70%. In the rest of the world, it's below 10%. He said, if I keep doing this, I don't know what number I'll come up with. And by the way, Alan Wilson, when he came out here, was the guy that invented Eve and invented the out of Africa theory. Do you know the guy that invented that recanted within 10 years and said it all came in Australia? He did say that. The out of Africa, we got the paper where he worked out the whole business, and then he recanted and said, we've got it wrong. Rebecca Cann, who worked with him, said the same thing and said the original people came into existence at least 400,000 years from 2 lineages. 2. And she said, I know one, but I don't know the other one. I know the other one. Look up. It's there. So the science of finance. But before I forget this, we have men in the room, and myself too. We must have a say in this also. So let me introduce you to Adam. We've done Eve. This is Adam. This is the most extensive Y chromosome test that's been done in the world. It's called the walkthrough test. What they did is they took 400 men who gave their sperm up for the greater good, and it was analysed. And what they did was they compared it against 13 distinct African markers. And what they said they'd do is, okay, 13 times 400 is 5,200. We'll see how many correlations we get to find out how strong the link is. Good science. Got no issue with that. So from the 5,200 possible links, do you know how many crossed over? None. Not one. They weren't just original, they were every race bar African. And that is the map of the African group. Now I don't have a pointer, I don't like using those things. Those 3 going up the side, A1, ALA, and A with that dot there, and possibly another one, are all African races. They never came out of there. See all the other ones there? They are the rest. And down there at 160,000 years is the base person. African, 130. Up the top you'll see Europeans and Asians. They're back around 40 to 60,000 years. So we've got 4 races. African up there, European and Asian up there, and they left that one as a circle. There's only one race left. It's us. We're the circle. So this is the story. If Eve is in Africa, Adam, this is a long distance relationship. He's from somewhere else. They've travelled, and here's the point. When he left, he went back home because he didn't go with any other ladies because it was just Eve. But we found out Eve wasn't there either. Now, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I know this is science and we're doing a lesson here in science, but your science lessons you've been given are all lies. These are all there's not one piece of information here that I've made up or channeled, and I'm not knocking channeling because it's legit. I'm just doing what they asked me to do, which is mainstream shit, which is what we do all the time. But I'm telling you now, the reason why mainstream hate us so much is because we put together their information and put together what's called the big picture. They don't have a big picture anymore now. They have agendas. Our big picture is based around what the original people guide us in. There is some science. I don't know how much longer it goes. I'm hoping it doesn't go too much longer for all our sakes. Oh, it does. Graham. When Graham came to Australia about 2 years ago, there was a rule. We went out in country for 6 days together, and on the 7th day, he was to be taken down to Kangaroo Island to meet our elder. This is my boss. Now, he's picked up, and I love it, he's doing it. He's gone to America now, he's really pushing original people in America. Fine, I'm happy with that. My wife said they've stolen our stuff. I said, no, we don't own this, it belongs to everyone. But there's something fascinating that absolutely proves, this is why we're published in America now with Random House. Hampton Road, brother. God, they got that wrong. And this is why mainstream in America knows it's true. Do you realise that in America, in places like Chile and Peru, all the children are taught the Australian people came to America, and there's not one school in Australia that teaches that. This is a study done by 6 universities, including dodgy universities like Princeton and Harvard. They did this over 3 years, and as David Reich said, we tried so hard to make the results go away, but they kept getting stronger. This is what they did. They took the mitochondrial DNA from the Tupu and Gi speaking people, who are a group of tribes that live in the Amazon, deep in the Amazon, and never married outside their genetic line. They refused to have anything to do with anyone else. The researchers said, this will be the closest we will get to a pure group that we can trace back to see where they came from. All said, yeah, let's do it. They all got together, 6 universities, 3 years. It took millions of dollars to do, countless amount of time, and they came up with this. The work is up there, which I won't bother telling you now. They found that the closest and only relation to those people are the people from Papua New Guinea, Australia, and the Andaman Islands. They're all original. And they said, that's it. The people next door to them weren't even close to that. No one was. No one in America was close as those people there. That's where it comes from. The red marks, 3 places. That is where the original people, American people, there's 2 groups there. There's the first group, the original people, that got there at least 500,000 years ago. We've got so many dates coming out there for that date. That's why Graham's gone across there. And then the Clovis people came about 12,000 years ago. There are now 15 sites in America that are past that date. And Dr. Walter Neves has in his possession 55 original skulls. I've seen them. They're there. It's done and dusted, ladies and gentlemen. The original people were in America before the Africans were even thinking about moving anywhere. Hundreds of thousands of years earlier. There are original genes. There was a survey done by Dr. Rao in India with the Dravidians, and he found 7 people that are fully original. They have a full original signature. He said they're not even Indian. To this day, that was done 3 years ago. They're all over the place, original genes. They were there. And then what we've done is we've forgotten, we've ignored, and we've omitted. And I'm hoping... Oh, I've gone the wrong way. No, I did that. I'm not going to do that one. We did it before. Right, last one. Okay. Here's the theory. 75,000 years ago, Africans come out of Africa and make their way across to Asia. I wrote to the Sydney Morning Herald, the science reporter, when they mentioned this particular eruption. And she said, my God, well, I can't put what you've put in because it'll change everything. There's a problem here, ladies and gentlemen. The largest eruption in the last 2 million years was Mount Toba. There it is there. Okay? It represents 2,800 Mount St. Helens. When it erupted, Vesuvius, when it erupted, there was 10 centimetres of ash in the general area. When this erupted, there was 1 metre of ash in Greenland and 3 metres of ash in India. It covered the world, and according to all the experts, it depleted the world's population to between 5 and 10,000 people. This happened in 73,000 years ago. This is all ridiculous, the 75. And 2 groups lived, according to the experts. One in the bottom of Africa, South Africa, and the very top of Scandinavia, were the 2 areas that escaped it. Oh, and 1 country didn't get any ash. Australia. We didn't get any. The rest of the world was wiped out. Was wiped out. Now what we're told is, it was wiped out completely. So what happened? That happened 72,000 years ago. What apparently took place in Africa was, there was a small group of maybe 5,000 at the most, and what they did within about 2,000 years is bred like rabbits and covered up the whole of Africa, and they spewed out and wandered around. But when they wandered through Asia and the Middle East, wherever they walked, there was nobody. Why didn't they settle? No, they kept moving. When they went through Asia, the rainforest, they kept moving. And what they did was they got down to India or Indonesia, and they looked ahead and they saw nothing. Because you can't see Australia, there's always a 100-kilometre gap. And then they made a boat and they sailed towards nothing and landed in Australia. That's what we're told. That is what they've been telling us. The world was wiped out by Mount Toba. That destroyed the place. It nearly wiped our population out completely. But a few Africans that were left, they didn't stay near their home and get everything balanced again and slowly creep out like you should. No, they just did a runner and went straight out of Africa, went through the whole of Asia, didn't stop, because the Asians don't come into existence until 40,000 years ago, and went to Australia. That is the mainstream story today, and that's what they stick by. The problem is, all the dates we've got are pre-75,000 years anyway. So ladies and gentlemen, I really am hoping, oh, praise the Lord, I am. You've now done your science. Now you understand you've been lied to. The scientists have deliberately lied to you. I can tell you the top academics in this country know full well what we're doing. And I also know academics have contacted us and said, we read all your work and we're told you're rubbish, but we don't think you are. We are breaking into mainstream. They are starting to listen because we do their science, and we do it as well as they do, but better, because we can make conclusions that come from the original people. And they were here first. In fact, they were here first everywhere. They know the full story. Now, I'm now going to give you a story, the second part of this, the time I've got left, and God only knows what time we started. What's going to happen is it'll stop when it stops, when we're out of time, because it's the only way we can do this. I'm going to talk about two sites. Some of you people who've seen us talk before have probably heard bits of this, but there have been developments with both of them. These are the two most, it's these rocks here, which I'll talk about at the very end, and that site there. That site is up where I live. I live up near a place called Byron Bay. We live in the rainforest just behind, probably about 20 k's from this site here. The map is wrong. We found the rocks. They're far bigger. I've stood next to them. Some of these rocks stand taller than my hand. This is a standing stone site, 184 standing stones. According to the person who analysed this in 1939, his name was Frederick Slater. He was the president of the Australian Archaeological Society. He wasn't a hippie with a nose ring. He wasn't someone with channeling. He was the president. He was hired by the Australian government, by the state government to do work on Egyptology and at the original language. Did you know in 1939 it was common knowledge they had one and an alphabet? That was common knowledge. And Slater writes that in his notes too. In fact, he was there to interpret rock engravings and stuff like that. He came up and he claimed, and he's correct, his date was wrong, he said this is the oldest temple humanity has ever made. There's nothing that comes close to it. It is older than anywhere else. It's the first time humans made a religious statement. Now, I worked with a person who destroyed the site. He was 91 at the time. His name was Jack, I won't say his last name. And every time he spoke about this, he bawled. He's a devout Catholic, he goes to church every Sunday. He would cry uncontrollably. This is what happened. 1939, news of this had gone around the world. The Carnegie Institute were interested. People from around the world were interested, and the war stepped in. When it did, there was a lot of fuss about this particular site, and people were talking about it a lot. The Australian government visited Jack's father in 1940. And I know this is true because I checked the bank records. In 1936, Jack and his father, they lost the farm to the CBC Bank in Sydney. They did own it, and then they lost it in 1939. They no longer had it. There was a visit in 1940 from the government, and I read the report. I've got Slater's notes. I've got his personal notes, handwritten, in a bag just in there. And he said, they came to him and said, we're taking your land off you. In the Second World War, do you think they could do that? Easy. So Jack was told by his dad, who was 15 at the time, go out to the mound. And by the way, there are 10 acres of rocks here. It's a complex with 100-odd stone arrangements. You have to go through all of them before you get to this. This is only for clever fellas of the highest order, to even walk on that mound. And Jack destroyed the whole site. And he spent months ploughing and destroying everything. Then his father said, go to the mound. Jack told me this. He said, go to the mound and destroy that now, so there'll be no evidence. Jack got the tractor up on the top, he turned the engine over, and he told me he was enveloped with this fear that if he put the blade in the ground, he would die. And he came back to his father, said, he was 15, he said, I can't do it, Dad. He said, I'm going to die. He said, don't be stupid. It's heathen stuff. He said, I'm not going to do it, Dad. Dad couldn't drive a tractor. So the mound stayed. That's the only reason it stayed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'll take you through the story of this mound. Well, I hope I will. Right, first up, you've got to understand, we did a lot of research. Did you know it was common knowledge through the whole of Australia before the Second World War, Egyptians were in Australia? Common knowledge. They all spoke about it. Sir Grafton Elliott Smith, I read a report in 1910 who said there is so much Egyptology in this country, it never ceases to amaze me. He was the first person to be knighted in Australia for services to academia. That's what he said. We only use top sources here. That isn't Egyptian. No, it's not. It's an original mummification. Original people use 23 different forms of mummification. One form of mummification is supposed to be exactly the same, according to Sir Ralph Sorrento when he looked at it in 1930, to what was done in the 21st to 23rd dynasty, even to the stage where they pull the brain out through a bone tool with a hook, and then they embalm it. That was normal. This is normal. The original people taught the Egyptians, I mean this, taught how to do embalming, and they took it back. They took everything back. We taught them everything they know. This is where they got their knowledge from. So this is common knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. I think the next picture, I hope it does. There are photographs. These are just different articles. Elliot Smith's theory, mystery of man, Egypt and Australia. Common knowledge. Common knowledge. All the papers published everywhere. By the way, all these records are gone now. We had to get one person to go to every state library in the country and go through microfiche to find this stuff, because they covered this up. And there's a reason. I've seen the treaty. There was a treaty that was done between the original people and the Egyptians. Question: has there been a treaty between the British and the original people? So legally, who has more right to be in this country? That is why the state and federal government don't like us. Right, I'm going to take you to this place now. I'm going to take you to what we found when we walked around here. We found shaped rocks. Shaped rocks without percussion points. Straight away, a black fella thinking, no percussion points, how did they do it? We percuss if we're using rock. But you've got to remember, people had technology far more superior than you. We threw it away. We understood why. It was one of the things the Pleiadians brought us they shouldn't have. I'm going to show you more. Now here's a problem. I've got coarse-grained sandstone and fine-grained sandstone on the same spot. You know what that means? The rocks have come from a lot of different places. Secondly, we're in the middle of a caldera. There is no sandstone for 22 k's from this place. No sandstone for 22 k's. How to get there? They were quarrying. See the sharp angles on that? How do you cut that without a blade? If I was going to do that rock on rock, and I've done it, I know how to do rock on rock, there's always a percussion bulb all the way along. They're shear cuts. By the way, these are just laying everywhere. Because when he bulldozed them, tens and tens of thousands of rocks, they were just bulldozed in the ground. They're still under the ground now. And because the main rocks have been moved around a bit, and we'll get to that soon. Okay, we'll just keep going through these. I'll just keep going along. You'll see the sharp rocks are everywhere. And then you get to the most important mound of all. There's more than one. This particular mound is 70 metres across, 5 metres high, 3,500 cubic metres of fill, and none of it is from that region. Every geologist and geographer has looked at it, and I've read reports, it doesn't belong here. See that big gaping hole there? That was dug out by farmers in the 1950s to spread on their sugarcane farms, because if you drive on top of it, you don't get bogged. They ripped it apart in the middle there. Now every one of those rocks I've marked out is sandstone. If you go past that, you'll find no sandstone anywhere except on the other place. There's no sandstone anywhere but there. This was artificially made. How do you move 3,500 cubic mils of fill from somewhere else to there? Getting an idea what these people were doing? This is going way back, ladies and gentlemen, way back. They're actually shaped rocks that came off the second mound. Again, see how sharp they are? And how, by the way, I've got one here. Where is it? It'll turn up. Bear with me, we've got plenty of time. It's this one. See the shape on that? You try and do that with two rocks. When you're at it, try and make that with two rocks. This place we found this, there are thousands of rocks like this. By the way, none of these rocks I've ever taken off country, they're given to me. If I took a rock off country, I'd be dead. The elder threw this and said, take this for the white fellas. So I've got stuff there that's 10 times better than this. He said, at least I'll understand what we could do. This rock is incredibly hard. You could only do this with a very sharp blade. But there it is, laying in the ground. Okay, moving along. There's another one. More shaped rocks. There's the one I just spoke about. That's the one I spoke about. It's been cut. It's been cut by technology that would be considered advanced today. And it was cut 40, 50,000 years ago. Right. Now it gets interesting. About 8 months ago, some original people were buying a block of land right next to a quarry, 2 kilometres from where the rocks were taken. Now when Jack told me he took the rocks, he said we picked them up and put them down near the dairy. Look at the size of those rocks. You can't put them in a ute, and you and I can't pick them up. That's column of basalt. It weighs about 8 tonne. What he said was, we put them down by the dairy, 1949, 1950, and one night, someone must have come and stolen them all because we come back the next day, they're all gone. And I looked at Jack and said, I didn't say anything because Jack, I'm doing this out of respect. My elder told me to treat him like an elder. I don't challenge him. But I thought this, Jack, you and your family had the only earth-moving equipment that serviced all the quarries in the whole region, and no one else had machinery like this until 1986. We checked. Nobody did earth-moving but him. So, if someone picked them up and moved them down that steep slope and put them there, they've got the equipment, but no one else has. And the other part is, where the dairy is, 50 metres from there is the house. So while these guys were picking up these rocks and banging them on the ground, no one woke up. And there are 184 of them. It would take about 4 days to move them. I looked at Jack and said, okay, Jack, fine. What he was doing was covering his family. He was covering his family. But give this guy credit. 2 weeks after an article went up on the Standing Stone site, he died. He wanted this to get out. It was a way of redeeming, a form of salvation for him. Have a look at those rocks. They're small ones. The farm next door picked up 6, 8 of them, and they're going to put them back. They didn't know at the time. They stand from here just below the ceiling. Now, they weigh about 10 tonne, 12 tonne. How do you take them up the side of a mountain and put them in the ground if you only have stick, stone and bone toolkits? You can't do it. You cannot do it. It's impossible. Now, we found them. There they are. I had to stand next to there basically to give perspective, otherwise you wouldn't know how tall they were. The problem we have is simple. There they are from another point of view. Can you see what's wrong with this now? These are some of the most sacred rocks in the country, in the world, and there they are stacked on top of one another with blade marks all over them. The elders found them and they called us across. So we then approached the people involved and said, can we take the rocks back? I've got 2 legal injunctions. I'm not allowed to go near the site within 200 metres of it legally. So then we went to Malcolm Turnbull, we went to Gladys Berejiklian, we went to our local member, we went to the mayor, we went to every group you're supposed to go to, and none of them would help us. And the rule was always the same. And it goes like this, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Australia. If it had been coal, if it had been gold, if it had been oil, they would have walked in straight away and done what they want. If it's the most important original site in the country, possibly the world, we must stand at the gate and wait to be asked in. And if he doesn't ask us in, we can't come in. That's how it works in Australia. By the way, we've done probably 50 shows in America in the last year. Every interviewer always asks the same question: what's happening with this? No one in Australia knows. I mean, our area, we all know about it now because we've done some articles and everyone around here knows about it. This is what we have. Now, here's the important part. Have you heard of Stonehenge? Right. In there, I've got a map that tells me where every rock goes. It tells me the name of each rock and it tells me the meaning of each rock. Did they have that in Stonehenge? No, they just put the rocks back where they thought they'd go. We know where they go, the exact position they go, because 3 months before this was destroyed, they mapped the whole mound, and it sits in my bag now. We had the map, we had the rocks, and we know where the mound was. The people who own the mound have also put an injunction out on me, and there's signs that saying anyone who goes past this point will be prosecuted and put in jail. Jack promised us the right to go on that place. His son said, I no longer honour anything my father said. His father gave him that land. And he said, I won't honour what my father said. That man stood in the room, sat in the room when I spoke to Jack about this. They never said a word then. But as soon as his dad went, he hates us. He can't stand us. So, it's all looking good, isn't it? No, it's not. It gets worse. That's what it looks like inside, ladies and gentlemen. There's your basalt. Just in case you don't think it is, that's the column of basalt. See that patina? Patina's like that thick, that red. That only comes up when they're exposed to the air. All of these rocks are incredibly rock and they've got thick bituminous because they've been exposed for so long. And only basalt is the only thing that will go there. And by the way, there's no quarry within about 8 k's of column of basalt. So how did you move them? How do you move them? In fact, how do you move them 5 metres? We couldn't do it. And you couldn't get 100 people to pick it up. I tried to move the things, and I can tell you now, you can't. There's a different picture of them, all looking good. There they are. And there they are today. See that stand of rocks there? See that stand of rocks there? He moved them. He moved them. While we're making this stuff, he picked the rocks up and moved them. He sold them. By the way, you've got to have a license to sell basalt, and he hasn't got one. He broke the law. I told people that. They said, oh, don't worry about it. Isn't that funny? He actually broke the law by selling basalt. Legally, you've got to have a permit to do that. When I alerted the authorities, he said, oh, don't worry about that. You sort of wonder about which side this law works for. It certainly doesn't work for me, I can tell you that. He's moved them all. They're gone. A lot of people got very upset because he's taken them away. Don't worry. I've got another picture, which I can't put up because I only got it about 4 or 5 days ago. We know where he moved them to. We've got people all over our area because we're very community conscious up our way. We know exactly where those rocks are. And we've got another picture from the back, and you can see them there, and some of them have been restacked right up the back again. About half of them are still there and the other half have been taken away. Now, this man, the developer, is a quarry owner. He's also a criminal lawyer. So he knows the law back to front. And we can't beat him because he's got too many contacts. But here's the trick with this. This is the most important site on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read to you. Slater interpreted and went through and read what the mound meant. I'm now going to read to you what was written on that mound and what they told us. And I'll have to put my glasses on because I've spent 5 years on that bloody computer and I've lost some vision here. Now what I'm going to read to you is just a series of statements that come straight from Slater's books, Slater's work, that tells us what the mound actually said. And I've got to start by telling you something. If you read the story about language, you'll find language is supposed to be something, to begin with, was very crude. It was basic. And we developed from that. That's what we're told. According to Slater and according to original people, this is the first language and this is what they wrote about. I'll just select about 10 readings. The breath of God is the divine light of the soul. The light of truth flows like a river of fire from God to the soul of man and woman united. There's some religions that could learn on that one a bit. Okay, the soul of man came from the immortal light to drink the water of life from God. I'll go on the next page and pick a few more. God came in with light from darkness and gave man a soul, and the sons of man brought in with light became the pillars of heaven. Here's an interesting one that was done in 1938. He who brought life into the world set down man and woman and gave them the most sacred means of propagating life. Who's writing about sacred means of propagating life in 1939? He is. Why? It's what he read. It's what he saw. The divine light emanating from the rod which tells of the fire that brought life from afar, point east to west. And it goes on. And it keeps talking about man. One of the most common sayings in this is man came to earth with 7 senses fully developed. 7. They're not here now. We've got 5. What about the other 2? Well, there's some people in this room that are developing them now. Channeling, telekinesis, they're the other senses we're supposed to have. You see, that's the trick with this. We're supposed to be spiritual beings, not what we are today. So, ladies and gentlemen, that particular site is in flux. We want to do ceremony and we want to bring mainstream people to that place to stand on the mound for a period of time, guided of course, and then taken away. But under no conditions could anyone ever go to that mound unless they were guided. It's too powerful. I won't go into what happened. I can tell you one story to give you an idea how powerful it is. When we got there, the very first day, this guy came from the middle. He knows the first language. We had 22 volunteers, 2 days on site. Jack gave me permission. 10 elders. And we told the 22 volunteers, you may be doing 2 days on site, you may not. we had to go there and get a sign. If we didn't get a spirit sign, nothing was going to happen. That's how we do archaeology. No spirit sign, no dig. Nothing. So, we went ahead. Kano led the way because he's old way. He's the one who disappeared, literally disappeared in front of me and Graham Hancock. And you ask Graham, he'll tell you, he can disappear in front of your eyes. He led the way, and we got up on the mound, and we looked at Kano and said, what now? He said, I want a sign. And he stung. And he called for hawks. Hawks had to come and fly above us. I'm thinking, oh God, hawks, this is going to be fun. Right, I've got 22 people waiting there. They're going to have a long day. I have to buy them lunch somewhere. Anyway, out of the bush, 2 hawks came from different angles and then circled above us, directly above the mound. And even the blackfellas there, because the rest we just think, that's a bit different. We turned to Kano and I said to Kano, can I get him now? He said, what? For 2? No, that's not a sign, that's a hint. Okay, so he keeps singing. Then another 3 join in. We have a circle of 5 hawks, the same breed. Think about this, 5 hawks, the same breed. They are not flock animals, hawks. They don't work like pigeons. They work individually and hunt. They don't hunt as a group. We looked at Kano. Can I go now? He said, no, I want 8. 8 hawks he wanted. And they had to circle in a figure 8 because the mound itself has got 2 circles and joined up like a figure 8. Within another 2 minutes, we had 8 hawks above us, circling in a figure 8. There are 8 people there. I've said this many times, and no one can call me a liar because we all saw it. I turned to Kano and said, is that enough? He said, now you can go. He said, follow the hawk. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll send one ahead, you follow him, and you keep up with him. One broke off, and it went down the track. Have you ever tried to follow a hawk? 1.5 Ks, I am sprinting, and the bloody thing kept its shadow on the track all the way through. It was probably slowing up for me. By the time I got there, I had done a 1.5 K sprint, and I was running as fast as I could. It pulled away probably 20 metres from that mob. I thought, oh, that's when I stopped. I thought, oh, thanks now. It took me about half a minute to talk to them because I had a lot of trouble gaining breath after that, and then we brought them back on site. Then the second day we had another sign to tell us halfway through to get off, and I won't talk about that. But what I am telling you is that's a site where people don't go unless they're there under the right conditions, because I do know of one other story of a person who went there in the 1980s and slept on the mound that night, and he told me. He woke up in the morning and the whole 1/2 side of his body was paralysed for 2 months, couldn't move it. And then one day it just all came good. The doctors didn't know what happened. He told me, I shouldn't have been sleeping on that mound. He said, lucky they didn't kill you. He said, yeah, I figured that out. If you go in a country in the wrong place and you do the wrong thing, you'll get killed. I know that, because I've actually been told that too. Okay, let's go with the time I left. I have no idea what it is, but it's going to be running out soon. Let's go to the rocks, I do hope. Right, great. I'll only get through a couple of them. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the story with these rocks. They are 5 minutes. He's waving a thing at me, so it's going to be real close here. I'm going to tell you about one rock only. The rest we're going to have to leave at that. We started early. We've got to catch up. I fully get that. There's no drama. I'm going to tell you about Ros's Rock 1. That's the first one of our group here. It is actually, where is it? If it's not there, I'm in trouble. This one, I have to hold while I talk about it, that's the rule. I'll take you through this very quickly. This rock, the Smithsonian Institute have written to me twice and made an invitation to come down and collect it. Sydney Museum and Australian Museum also want it, they won't touch it. These are all going to be placed on country and stored in a sacred site, and they'll never leave the earth. They're not going to go into any stupid display cabinet. This particular rock has been cut many times. It is extremely hard. You can throw this on concrete and you won't make a mark. And I've dropped it twice, unfortunately. I know it's true. You cannot buy a chisel. On the country it'll cut this. These have been cut as continuous lines. They were never chiseled. They were cut. They were sliced. They were heated. There is a coat on top and there's a rock underneath that's separate. All of these rocks on this side have been coated. I'm going to take you through this rock very quickly, and I'll show you a couple of important parts. Number one, there's your language. It's a language of angles. It's a language of angles. And we've got a gentleman overseas called Dr. Derry Cunningham that does work on these rocks for us. And what I'm going to try and do is take you through this very quickly. Oh, that's interesting. What happened there? Okay, we've got to go. There we are. Right. Right. What it does is you've got one side like that, then you've got a side that comes off. All of those lines will mark on to a line on the next side, which is this side here. There is the thumb point. All these rocks have got to be held in certain ways. This rock is held like this. The thumb sits on there and the finger sits in that wedge there and the forefinger fits in that piece there. Always where it's roughed up so I get more contact with the rock. These rocks only come into activation when they're in a hand. If they're laid on the ground, you can put a crystal on top, rods on top, they won't work. They work in symbiotic relationship with us. We are a partnership here. Right, this side here, fascinating. It's fascinating because of that. See the angle that turns up the most on this side? 33 degrees. This rock was found at Carrion, which is 33 degrees south of the equator. 33 degrees for Masons is a very important number. You know why it's an important number? They learn it from the blackfellas. Okay, now, here's a rock from Calgary. It's got 22 angles on it. 22 angles. Of those 22 angles, 20 are on this rock. Exactly the same. 20 from the 22 angles. Exactly the same. Now, see the Bosnian Pyramid. You guys heard of that? Dr. Samir knows us well. He sent us a rock. He said, we've got a rock here. Let's measure it. And we did. There it is. It's got straight lines just like that, and they wondered if there was a correlation. Different sort of rock, doesn't matter. And this is a correlation. See those angles there? There's 15. All 15 are on this rock. Calgary, 20 out of 22. By the way, I've got the other angles on these rocks. This one here, 15 out of 15. We've got a rock in Germany, I don't think it's up there, 10 angles. We've got them all there. International language, ladies and gentlemen, you can't argue with that. You can't tell me 3 rocks in Germany, in Bosnia, and in Calgary with 52 angles, and I've got 50 on one rock. That's a coincidence? Nobody would believe that. That would be stupid, wouldn't it? Right. Oh yeah. Street map. That's the street map of Washington DC. It's on this rock. No, these rocks are special, guys. There's an infill. It's on this side here. My geologist who saw this was blown away by this. He said, this rock, by the way, is 12,000 years old at least. He said, that's been in there for 12,000 years. It's a different material. We don't have any adhesive that could do that today. And there's a lot more. Okay. There's another infill there. It's got metal in there. And then you've got your prints, your stamps, where they stamp down here. My geologist told me, he was the head geologist of Sydney Uni, so he's not just a punter. 3,700 degrees to make it stamp down like that so it don't cut. Because those imprints there have been stamped into the rock. They were burnt in. You need 3,700 degrees to do that. There it is close up. It's been punched. Right, I'm going to stop there because there's a lot more and I've got to finish up. I'm going to finish with this, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, children. I kick them all the time, but they tolerate it. I'm going to close with a story. And I'll finish up on that. Probably a couple minutes over, but bear with me. I've still got the stadium, you can't kick me off. It goes like this. About 6 years ago, I went on site in Carrion, and we had a good day. Auntie Bev was crook, because she normally smokes us on country, and she couldn't do it, so I did a different ceremony myself, I'm allowed to, I'm a blackfellow, that was given me by Jerry, Uncle Jerry. And we went to this site. It was an orb site, and we filmed it, and we had one orb that went up the side and around our head, all sorts of stuff, quite good. They're spirits. And we came back, and we're feeling good, and Evan, who's here today, brought the mobile thing, and he said, Kano wants to talk to you. And everyone gasped. Because normally what happens is, an elder, when I've got to talk to Kano, someone rings me and tells me I have to ring Kano. Kano never rings you unless you're in deep trouble. And everyone said, oh God, give me the phone. And he says to me, you're on country today, weren't you? And carry on. I said, yeah, Kano, it's not your country. He said, don't worry, I've got more to tell you. He said, you didn't smoke yourself today, did you? I said, no, I did that. He said, don't tell me about the rocks, I know all about that. He said, I've got a red kangaroo in front of me telling me everything you've done. As we got there, an owl flew out. And we picked up a feather. Evan picked up a feather. He got sick for 3 months after this. And we all thought that was a good sign. Oh, shit, it wasn't. And he said this. He said, we know what you've done. He said, they're not happy with you. They know who you are. They're going to put up with it this time. He said, but if you ever go onto country again without smoking yourself, the spirits will kill you. You've got your only warning, and hung up. That was normally a fair conversation. I want to tell you something. That man can disappear in front of our eyes. He can talk to the animals. And he told me this. He said, every person on this planet can do the same. That's what we could be. You see, in original society, everyone had magic. When they went out, the children, after they were cut and become men, they went off for 3 months on their own. To find what? Their magic. That is what we're here to do. That mob, all those mobs that are coming from overseas, the Pleiadians and from others, they came here, the Pleiadians came here in a partnership with us. And the deal was this, to create something greater than the gods that created us. That's what they wanted to do. And that's why they put the Pleiadian genes inside every human on this planet. Now I'm going to tell you one thing. I know what's coming next. The elders have told me. The intelligentsia have told me. And I'm going to meet them next week. There is a change coming. But when the change comes, it's too late to make your mind up. It's too obvious. Everyone will say, yeah, I get it now, I'm part of the group. It doesn't work like that. There's a change coming soon. It's not in 10 years. It's not in 5 years. It's close. I won't tell you where, and I know where it's going to happen too. What I'm saying now is, this is our ancestry. These rocks are the original people of the past, all of their history. Those rocks are going on to one of the foremost sacred sites in the country within the next 6 months. They'll be put in proper ceremony, and elders and original people from all over the world are getting ready for this change. It is coming. There's no denying that. And what's happening now is, these rocks now are so powerful, so incredibly powerful. One person has touched them and died. Another person, his life has become miserable. He came back with 5 cancers and lost 15 kilos because he touched them. They vibrated a level that our bodies aren't even close to. I now have been with them long enough now that we've got some sort of living arrangement where they don't hurt me anymore. And they have done a lot of things to me. They've nearly killed me twice. They nearly killed my wife too. But now we're used to it. They vibrate at a level we can only dream about, that we did have. That level is coming back. Those rocks are part of that. So ladies and gentlemen, this is just an aperitif because there's so much more about this. We only did one of the rocks and there's 150 of them. I'll finish with this. Stay true to what you believe. And the people who don't believe this, don't get angry with them. Feel sorry for them. Because if they don't get it right soon, there's going to be a line in the sand. I'm going to close with what the elders told me will happen next. He said, after this event takes place, on this planet, there will be 2 simultaneous realities at 2 different levels. Make sure you're on the top one. Thank you so much.